Well, President Trump says he will allow the release of thousands of pages of long classified records in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The National Archives will make the JFK files public, we are told, by Thursday. Most records are believed to be from the 1960s and 70s, but some files, they say, were created into response to all the conspiracy theories that have been raised over the years, especially after the release of Oliver Stone's 1991 movie, JFK. So, what could we learn from this release? Ambassador James Woolsey joins us. He's the former director of the CIA. Ambassador, always good to see you. Let me just start. If I can have your indulgence, here's my theory. There was a cover-up in 1963. It was a cover-up by the CIA and the FBI because they did not want Americans to know the extent of surveillance of Lee Harvey Oswald. He was recorded trying to get visas in the Russian and the Cuban embassies in Mexico City a few weeks before the assassination. He had contacts with the FBI. In fact, he confronted FBI agent James Woolsey in the FBI Dallas office by leaving him a letter, a threatening letter, because Woolsey tried to interview Marina, Oswald's wife. Do you think these new documents will shed any light on any of that?
Those and others. And I think the best thing to read to get ready for those publications is a book by Michal Pacepa, P-A-C-E-P-A, who was the head of Romanian intelligence at the time and defected to the United States in '79. Pacepa reflects the views of all of the Eastern Bloc heads of intelligence at the time. And he says they all believe the following, which was that Khrushchev did order Kennedy assassinated, that Oswald was picked to do it, that he went through all of the training, and then Khrushchev got cold feet, decided about a month ahead of time to call off the assassination, but Oswald went ahead anyway. He was a trained Marine sniper. He knew what he was doing, and unfortunately, he was successful. A lot of conspiracy theories have poked up, covering everybody from Lyndon Johnson to the Pope as being involved in the Kennedy assassination. I think the only one, other than the kind of traditional look from the Warren Commission, which is looking flakier and flakier, I think except for that, what has come up new that is useful is this approach of Pacepa's, and that's what ought to be checked out in the details of the information from the defectors that have come since then. And gone into very thoroughly to see if Pacepa and the other intelligence heads in Eastern Europe were right.
Wow, that is absolutely astounding. So basically, he was, in your sense, a lone gunman who did it on himself, but with the planning of the Soviet Union. I mean, what would have happened?
I want to stress that I'm not sure this is right. What I'm doing is reporting Pacepa's book. But Pacepa says, and he was head of Romanian intelligence, that his view is shared by all of the heads of Eastern Bloc intelligence at the time of the assassination.
What would have happened if, indeed, this was made public back then, that there potentially, as you say, or as he claims, there was some Soviet Union influence?
Well, I think the reason Khrushchev pulled back is the same reason, which is that people, once they got really close to this and realized the implications of assassinating an American president, could well be right away nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union. Even Khrushchev, with his hot-headedness and table pounding with the Shiu and all that, even Khrushchev got a flash, is what this story says, of rationality and decided to pull back, but he still didn't stop Oswald, who was a deeply committed Marxist-Leninist communist assassin.
Yeah, someone who told me that was Priscilla Johnson McMillan, a remarkable woman. She's 89 years old now, up at Cambridge at Harvard. And she worked for JFK in the 50s in the Senate office and met Lee Harvey Oswald as a newspaper reporter in Moscow and interviewed him. She said that she believes that was his motivation, and that he was nuts. Here's what she told me in a 2013 interview. Do you think the mafia killed President Kennedy?
No.
The CIA?
No.
LBJ?
No.
Oswald alone?
Yeah, I do, yes. And I think he got away with it because he was alone. And I also think that if there'd been anybody else, it would have fouled him up. I would put a lot of emphasis on the mental illness. You know, he was going to end up badly, but that he ended up badly, and as an historic figure, that would have taken a lot to predict.
Ambassador, final thoughts. Some in the national security arena are saying this would be a threat to national security to release this information. Do you think that it's the right or the wrong thing?
Well, I'm enough of an historian. I think I'd go with the release posture here, that it happened long enough ago that it's unlikely to stimulate any particular immediate strong hostility between the U.S. and Russia that isn't appropriate. People have a right to know what happened, and it may be that there's some flaw in Pacepa's and the other intelligence heads' reasoning, and we'll find out about it. But in any case, people ought to go through this in great detail. By the way, Oswald was not completely alone, because the Cubans were looking over his shoulder, and he was ordered through the KGB to kill Oswald during that transfer from one jail to another. So Ruby was, according to the Pacepa Eastern Bloc intelligence assessment, Ruby was doing Castro's bidding, and Castro was doing Khrushchev's bidding in killing Oswald.
Well, that others say was, I know someone who was standing next to Ruby, the great New York Times reporter Mickey Carroll, said that he just went to get the Western Union $25 for the stripper, and he happened to walk down the ramp because he knew all the cops, and they let him in. But I guess that's all part of the mystery that continues the investigation. Ambassador James Woolsey. Sure. As always, fascinating. We have not heard of this before. We will look up that book. Thank you.